Hello and welcome everyone to Crow Canyon's Powering Up Your SharePoint and Office 365 Business Applications webinar. This is session 2 of our Powering Up series. We did session 1 on UI UX a couple weeks ago, and we'll do session 3 on reporting and analytics in about another 2 weeks on November 3rd. This one is about workflows, what we're calling the heartbeat of applications. I had a lot of fun putting this together, this slide deck. Workflows are really the key to a lot of what goes on in SharePoint and Office 365. Many subjects, many areas I could go with this. This will be kind of an overview, and hopefully we'll answer some of your questions or raise some questions or give some insights into workflows. Let's see how it goes here. First of all, objectives here are just basically to understand what workflows are, review some of the options, and see what Crow Canyon's Nitro layer has to add to this. As you can see below, there's session 1 with UI UX. This is session 2, workflows, and session 3 will be reporting. This is me, Scott Restivo. Here I'll be giving the presentation today. I'm founder and president of Crow Canyon Systems. Been doing this for almost 20 years now. Crow Canyon has customers all around the world. Many industries, many different kinds of size of organization where we have put in SharePoint and Office 365 applications and done some both bespoke out-of-the-box applications as well as a lot of custom development projects. So workflows. What does workflow actually mean? We talk about workflows. What is a workflow? Well, basically any job we have, there's work, and more work. And are we having fun yet? You know, we get harassed, overburdened, a lot of going on, many complexities. So how do we make it easier? Well, work can flow. You can use tasks and workflow, tasks and effort, make things smoother through workflows. Workflows automate important business processes and tasks, provide visibility, accountability, lifecycle tracking, communication. This is all very basic business process automation that goes on in BPA, business process automation. There's been books written on this ever since, I guess, the first caveman made a wheel out of stone or whatever. But I mean, basically, how do you do work in a way that's efficient and effective and gets the job done without overburdening and stressing you out? I just want to point out that the term workflow itself has got a little bit muddied, at least in my opinion, because the SharePoint uses it workflows, the SharePoint Designer workflows. Those are really specific instances of what a workflow is. That is not how we're using it in this webinar. I'm using it to define more common business workflows. These are more at the general sense of the flow of work that goes place in these different departments, marketing, sales, human resources. Any department in your organization has workflows. So things are going on right now, probably right as you speak at your company. There's workflows going on, whatever it is, whatever company and what kind of organization you have, there are workflows, and many of them happening in different ways, whether they're automated or not, whether they're paper-based, whether it's just people talking to each other. There's all kinds of things going on there. And that's what we're talking in this case about workflows. So they can be very simple. This is like ridiculously simple. But they also can be very complex. There's going to be many different kinds, whether it's onboarding, leave. I mean, there's many different processes that go on and ways to map them out. Here at Crow Canyon, we encounter many organizations, and they communicate with us that they want to get something done. They want to automate a business process. Sometimes we get written descriptions. Sometimes we get elaborate video documents, diagrams. The pluses here, for example, would branch off into other areas. So there's a lot of complexity to some of these. In order to talk about this, what I wanted to do is introduce some of the work of Sarah Haas, who's one of a SharePoint speaker. We see her at the SharePoint Fest, SharePoint TechCon. She's up in the Twin Cities area. And I like some of her work, so I wanted to introduce it. You can also look it up at blog.splibrarian.com. There's a lot of information there. Well, she makes the point that a lot of times we start out with the best of intentions with these workflows, and they should be clear and direct and go from start to end, where they have a conciseness and just completeness. But often what happens is they end up like this by the time we get done with the process of looking at what goes on, because people add on different processes, they load up different things they want done and try and make everything happen. It goes from kind of a very straightforward. She says, you go to a stop sign, you stop, you don't think about adding other things like check the tire pressure at the same time. It's kind of funny the way she puts it. But in our workflows and businesses, sometimes we want to add on all those extra components. When doing a workflow, it's important to map out the process. What do you want to do? What do you want to automate? What business need are you trying to solve? What is the current process and its pain points and bottlenecks, highlights of that? What work can be automated? What can be eliminated? What can be overcome? How can we shave some time off the existing work processes? Then what would how would you like to see it ideally happen? So what improvements can SharePoint bring to it? These are the kind of questions that are important in mapping out the process, the kind of analysis that has to go on. Now, if you have a very simple workflow, go to this extent because it's so obvious. But when you start to go into more capabilities, what SharePoint and Office 365 can provide, you want to start thinking about these things. What is the process? What are we trying to improve? How can SharePoint or Office 365 alleviate some of that pain or make things easier? A lot of questions come up during workflow design. Well, what initiates it? Under what conditions? What events? What actions? What subroutines? Are there branching? This is a whole subject into itself, and that's why I say when I did this deck, I realized that this could be a whole webinar on its own, how to map out the process, what kind of questions to ask, how to look at what functions workflows can provide, routing, alerts, approvals, automatic assignment, recurring, and there's many, many things that workflows can do. So how do you implement these together? How do you make a process out of it? What triggers a workflow? In SharePoint, now I'm looking a little bit specifically at SharePoint and Office 365 here because usually it's item or document based. So is the document or item created, modified, deleted? Is it based on a date time field? Is it based on just absolute time, like every July 1st do something, every 1st of the month, every 10th of the month? Is there a manual kickoff where you push a button? What triggers the workflow? What gets it going? It could be based on certain conditions. It's the items created, but this, that, and the other thing have to happen also. What actions take place once the workflow goes on? Are you going to create another item? You're going to delete an item, update an item? On and on and on. Many, many possibilities can happen when a workflow is triggered. For example, an item is created, the priority is high, the category is network, and the actions are you want to notify a director, set due date to 4 hours, and assign the team one. So the trigger is when an item is created. Conditions are when priority is high and category is network. So it's not going to go off every time an item is created, but only when it meets that conditions. And what actions is it going to take? Well, it's going to notify director, which is a send mail action. It's going to set due date to 4 hours. It's an update item action. It's going to assign to team one, which is another kind of update item action. And now you can actually get to the point where you can branch off. So if you go here and go assign to team one and notify team one, well, maybe that kicks off another notification that when the ticket is assigned or the item is assigned to someone, that's another work process. So you can start to link these together into a whole chain. Now this is kind of a complex insurance example where they have many, many processes and things that interact with each other as the workflow moves down, as the claim goes through its resolution and whatnot. So, it can have simple or complex, but the important thing is to map it out. And you can map it out with different diagrams. So you can use whiteboard, just a piece of paper, whiteboard, Word, simple. It doesn't have to be that complicated. You can do some mock-ups in the tools themselves, which we'll cover in a moment. Some of the tools available in SharePoint and Office 365 for doing workflows. You create some proof of concepts there, do some mock-ups. That's another example. But most often you're going to have to do some kind of what we call wireframe, like those video diagrams that I showed you earlier, or PowerPoint. Sarah Haas recommends this Balsam IQ. And there's many other workflow designer tools. You may have some of your own that you like. These are designer tools, not the tools to actually implement it, but the ways to present it to business owners and management, or if you're a consultant, to your clients to say, okay, can we get buy-off? Is this the way it works? How is this going to go? Now, I'm going through this fairly rapidly, maybe 10 minutes on this, but this is really a whole world unto itself as far as how to map out what processes what tools to use to do it. I just want to make the point that before you jump into coding, we have to give it some thought as to what is the workflow going to do, what is it going to accomplish, how's the best way to make this happen, and that involves talking to users and business owners and doing some kind of interactive or consultative work to get that straight. Sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it's very complex, and as Sarah Haas was pointing out, that the simple can get very convoluted very quickly as people load on things. So it's very important to kind of keep a steady hand inside what we want to do as we go through the design process. Now, Sarah also makes a point here that I thought was kind of interesting and I wanted to bring up. And certainly if you're interested in this, go to her blog and look it up. And I'm crediting her entirely on this. And she's someone we know and have met at these conferences. And we attend a lot of these SharePoint Tech Fest and SharePoint Fest and SharePoint Tech Cons and SharePoint Saturdays and on and on. And I was just in Portland last Saturday at SharePoint Saturday, for example, Portland, Oregon. Anyway, there's a whole community and we talk with each other and we share ideas. So one of Sarah's ideas here, which I really like, is that there's this idea that if you have an existing process and you can model it this way, you're going to say, okay, my current process, there's every week somebody spends 4 hours doing this iteration or this process, and she does, of course, every week 52 times a year at a certain hourly rate means it costs them $10,000. But if you can say knock 2 hours off that by doing this workflow automation, then you've saved yourself half that money. Now those figures obviously change quite rapidly, and many times we find much higher ROIs on this. And knocking substantial time off or multiple workflows will really save the company money. So this is part of making the case to management or making the case for doing this kind of work. And some of it's obvious, but it's also nice to have some kind of model to quantify it to get the ROI. But ultimately, all this about mapping it out and setting up the ROI comes down to two simple questions. Does it save the organization time and money? And number two, does it make someone's or a group of people's job easier and better? Ultimately, that's the qualitative aspect of it. And several speakers have pointed this out. You can crunch the numbers all you want, but ultimately, if users have the perception that the workflow is making their life easier and it's smoother to get things done, then you're going to have a lot more success no matter how much time you spend saying, look, it's going to save all this money. That might appeal to the CEO, to business owners, but the users themselves, they want it to make their job easier and better. And ultimately, they've got a big smile on their face and things are going smoother. Don't have so many Excel spreadsheets to run around or emails to find or whatever process it is to make it smoother. So that's the goal, really. So how's this done in SharePoint and Office 365? What are the tools that are available? In our previous session 1, we had pointed out that in the UI UX, of course, UI UX, we're talking about forms and portals. So we talk about good forms are important, need to be interactive, dynamic, validate inputs, pull information, but most important are one of the factors here is that they're initiating workflows and business processes. So someone has to fill out a form or send in an email, which is kind of a quasi form, or make some kind of request or start the process in that way, and then the workflow can take it from there. So good forms are important. You want to gather the right information to start the workflow and do the processing on it. But moving into the specific tools themselves, I did kind of a catalog on this and found these 5 options, really, kind of general categories. So let's explore them a little one by one. The point here is you're looking at a possibility of automating some process. There's some pain in your organization. Now you want to fix that, change it, and you see that SharePoint Office 365 hold the promise to do it. Now how do you actually do it? Okay. So now we have Visual Studio. If you're a Visual Studio, you're a programmer, developer, you like doing this, your company's going to do it, then you certainly can code amazing things in a SharePoint workflow world and write them all up, and this is your world, then you know all about it already. I don't think I have to say much about it, but I do want to point out some pros and cons. Pros, of course, is highly customizable. You can create whatever you want. Easily deployable once you compile it into some kind of solution file, and it can do all kinds of workflows, not just sequential. Cons, of course, you got to know C#. Very hard to revise because you got to revise the code and then recompile it and distribute it. And you need a developer. I mean, I guess good job security for a developer, I suppose, but you need a developer to come in and make the actual changes. It's not like your normal power user, even myself included, would be able to go into C# and start making changes. And that is a very important consideration of the workflows you create, is that they are going to need to be adapted and updated and modified as they are put into place and as time goes on. Now, we also all know about SharePoint workflows and SharePoint Designer. I don't know if anyone's not familiar with this, but if they aren't, this is your screen you get if you go to SharePoint Designer. Gives you some options, how to put it together, different workflows. There's like step 1, step 2. There's this ribbon up here. You can do condition actions, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some capabilities there. It's good for basic workflows, but let's look at the pros and cons of that. Pros are that with some training, not a lot, you have some logical kind of orientation to your way of work. You can create workflows. They're relatively quick and simple to put together, but the thing is they only do sequential workflows, and it's difficult to deploy to other environments. If you do it for that one list or site, you basically have to recreate it for the next list or site. Sort of a lot of limitations with it, and most people don't seem that happy. I mean, I look on the blogs and reviews and talk to people at these shows, and most they call SharePoint designers. People have called it SharePoint destroyer, which I thought was kind of funny. So people don't seem too enamored by it, but it does provide some functionality out of the box that you can do for some workflows, and it does have some purpose to it. Well, Microsoft recently came out with Microsoft Flow, which is another option, and they put together these different units of functionality, you might say, like little snippets. And basically, from what I've heard from Ignite and other places, and the Ignite conference just happened last month in Atlanta, and talking to other developers and SharePoint people, basically looking 3 to 5 years before this really gets to a point where it becomes a full-fledged workflow kind of management tool. Right now, it's just for these particular functionality. A lot of options there, but very kind of particular purposes. It's a little bit like SharePoint Designer, where you have this step-by-step kind of setup. So maybe it's something to keep an eye on. Maybe has some limited use or specific uses right now, but not really to create a whole full-fledged workflow. That brings us into the big boys like the platforms, Nintex, the other one's K2. These are big players. There's others in there. So let's look at what they have to say. Now, my point in this webinar, again, this is a subject that could be a whole webinar in itself, is not to dig deep into this. Basically, if you already are sold on Nintex and K2, you use them. Some of you probably do. I'm sure you're familiar with them. At least Nintex, you hear about all the time, can do a lot and has a lot of functionality, has a lot of capability. Pros, it's got a visual interface, drag and drop. It's got a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of simple or complex. You can do different kind of workflows. It's not just a sequential. A lot of capability, many actions. I think I read 100 different actions they have now. It can integrate with other systems. So quite a useful platform. The cons of it, of course, you got to buy it. There's cost of it, whatever the price is per WFE or per application server. Certain learning curve and documentation on how to use it. Another question becomes like, well, you create a workflow, you put it in place, it has to be supported and updated. Well, if you're there for years, then I guess you can keep doing it, but you do have to keep up on porting and updating it and making any changes. Again, like I was saying about Visual Studio, workflows inevitably evolve and change and need other refinement perhaps, and you want to be able to do that without having to hire a Nintex consultant every time there's a change needed to be made. And a lot of times we find when we work with Nintex, people using Nintex, our customers, we're working with a consultant who works at the company. So the consultant, the company has to engage a Nintex consultant to get the work done. And I just make a point that Crow Canyon and we have a number of customers who are using both Nintex and the Crow Canyon application. So there's no real conflict there in that use of both at the same time for different purposes at the organization. That's another option there. I mean, this is again, this subject here of the tools could be delved into quite a bit also in determining what's the best way to implement this workflows, which tool to use. Probably some of you are already familiar with Nintex. So let's look at some other considerations here. You want to make sure mobile and responsive design is in the workflow so that you can get remote users, people using tablets or smartphones. Always seems like the executive is running to the boarding line at the airport, and he has to make a decision whether to approve or deny something. I don't know how many times we hear that when we talk to customers. I was at the airport yesterday actually and joking with some of the people there, I was looking around for executives running with their smartphones having to approve something. I didn't see too many, but every time we talk to our clients, they want the mobile capabilities, and it certainly is important, and I certainly agree with it, but it's just funny how you hear over and over that, well, my boss is on his way to somewhere and he needs to approve it, and while he's in the boarding line. Having big buttons and easy use interface, that's very important of a part of a workflow that they can take an action, such as whether they're submitting something, approving or denying or changing the status, is something that they can do on the fly, not be tied to the desktop. And of course, that's the whole way SharePoint and Office 365 are going anyway, mobile, cloud first, that whole initiative. Okay, now that we've covered some of the mapping out of workflows and what the purpose is, making life easier and saving the organization time and money, the tools that are available, any one of those subjects that could easily delve into much more depth in a webinar of its own perhaps, but in this one we're kind of giving an overview of it, and I hope that's helpful. Right now we're going to go into look at what Crow Canyon's approach to this is. And what we have is this Nitro application layer. And what is that? Okay, let's look at that. Nitro is an application layer that enhances SharePoint Office 365. This is unique to Crow Canyon. We developed this layer that provides functionality on top of SharePoint and Office 365 because primarily we're application developers. And as part of any application, you need workflows, of course. We have Nitro for Office 365, 100% native to Office 365. We have Nitro for SharePoint in 2013 or 2016, which is on premises. Now, this is not a platform that we sell. This is an application layer we use in our applications and custom development to provide that kind of base functionality that we're talking about, and one of them is workflows. So let's go a little deeper into it. So this is a point I want to make. It's not a fancy slide, but let's think about this for a moment. Crow Canyon's approach is a little different. We come from the application perspective. An application is really a collection of workflows and activities. All these work together to provide this certain specific important business process automation that goes there. Within the application are workflows. So the application has UI, UX, forms, it has workflows, it has reporting and analytics, and that's what we're covering in these 3 sessions. But speaking specifically about workflows, the workflows are an embedded part of it and are related to the application and the progress of the applications as it goes through. Now, having a workflow manager inside our application makes the application highly customizable without any coding, highly customizable to adapt and modify that workflow as it pertains to the application. We have this application layer, we call it Nitro, and you can see that it has UI, UX with forms and portals, as workflows and processes, and reporting and analytics. And we also have database integration and other aspects to it too, but basically this is used to make SharePoint Office 365 much more capable as we produce our applications and custom development. And right now we're focusing on the middle part, workflows and processes. So there's quite a little bit of a different approach to take here. One is that you have the workflow and you're going to build it in Nintex or you're going to build it in Visual Studio. And that where an application is more like you're getting this whole set of functionality that's been already mapped out, already been developed over time and used in the marketplace, but embedded in that is a workflow capability. So we use Nitro, we build many kinds of applications, IT help desk, asset management, customer support, a lot of common core business applications built on that Nitro platform for Office 365 or SharePoint 2013 or 2016 on premises. These are out of the box. You get most of the functionality you need, but you also have the opportunity to tweak it with the different utilities that we provide in it. One of those utilities is Workflow Manager. Approval app is another one. Alerting and notifications are that. That's just a slightly different approach than building a workflow like we're going to get Nintex and build workflow. Well, even if you get Nintex, which is certainly a capable tool, you still have to know what application you want to build and all the different functionality. And believe me, these things are complicated in the sense, we've done this for almost 20 years, dealing with thousands and thousands of organizations around the world. And just even asset management can go in many, many different directions, whether you want barcoding, whether you want secure access to those assets, whether you want check-in, check-out. All those things are possible to do and possibly in Nintex or Visual Studio or other workflow. And I guess you could build the application, but you have to consider all the different aspects of it. People who are looking more at the application perspectives and want flexibility to build workflows within those applications, that's more the approach Crow Canyon takes with the Nitro layer. We also do other applications like security access requests, HR requests, document management, the list goes on, and many, many custom projects also, claims management or critical essential asset. I won't bore you to tears on this because the thing is this is all listed on our website, or you can talk to us, and if you have some project that aligns with something like this, we can talk about that and go into depth. And we really always are very, fascinating to me to hear what organizations are doing and how we can help them out to be more automated, enhance, save time and money, make people's jobs easier, as we said. So let's take a little bit closer look at this. I said, what is the case for applications versus workflow tools? Well, 6 of one, a half dozen the other, but there is some advantage here with applications. Is supported and updated by us, an established vendor. Canyon established in 1999, so you're not going to have to worry about having the Nintex consultant or the Visual Studio, C# developer around. Changes in SharePoint, changes in Office 365 were there. And the workflows are customizable using our workflow manager. So I say that because we're specifically talking about workflows in this webinar. There's many other utilities in our applications that make them flexible also. A forms manager, I mentioned the approval app, the reporting capabilities. So specifically, we put a workflow manager in this. And when I thought about this deck, I said, that's kind of interesting because it's kind of a different perspective where you have kind of the raw map of a workflow. How do I put it together versus you have an application that already kind of embraces all that functionality, but you want to have some flexibility within the application to set up how you want, say you're doing a help desk, how you want that new ticket to happen. Who do you want to notify? What is the basis for doing a service level agreement? What's the basis for doing an automatic assignment? If you're doing asset management, you can come in and set up different workflows for maintenance or regular scheduled events that are going to happen. The same for all the different things, especially like for onboarding, it has many, many different flows and directions it goes in. Within the application itself, using the lists and forms and functionality and fields that are already in there as part of it, you can then modify the workflows and create new workflows and do all kinds of interesting things with them to make it customized in particular to your purposes. And like I said earlier, you can also even use Nintex to interact with our applications if you already have Nintex going on at your company. So Workflow Manager gives the ability to create, configure workflows. You can edit one. You can determine what action kicks it off, what conditions that are under, what actions are going to take place for that. You can run multiple workflows on a list, on a site. You can really set up the application. Say it's a leave request that we were looking at earlier, that visual diagram we looked at, to do all this kind of branching to say, well, if it's this kind of leave request or from this kind of organization, depending on the amount of time, it should go in this direction. If it's, for an onboarding, the same thing, is what kind of position is it? Is it a role that needs to be, set role that needs to be a particular workflow based on that role, give them certain security access requests because it's a manager or whatever, or maybe you have to ship them stuff if it's onboarding because they're out in a remote office. All kinds of things can go on within the application because the workflow manager will create different actions based on different conditions when you can set it up that way. Quite an interesting approach to take versus creating workflows from scratch from raw SharePoint and Office 365. You can also set up different conditions, different actions. Quite a lot of capabilities with that. So here's a little focus on the different aspects of this workflow manager. Now we can do demos of any of this. We can talk about it. We can show live presentations one-on-one. That's certainly a possibility. Let's summarize a little on this, what I've talked about in this webinar. Obviously, automation of workflow is important to any organization. If you're not doing it, you should. And we get calls from people, they're still using email to do asset tracking or help desk or HR requests, office supply requests, anything like that. They're still using email or spreadsheet. Automating workflows using SharePoint is really, really effective way to save time and money and make someone's job easier and better. It really can be effective if done right. All of a sudden, instead of forms to fill out, instead of Excel spreadsheets or emails, you can track the request through a list as an item. You can do a lot of functionality and actions on that as it goes through it using workflow actions based on certain conditions and triggers. It's something that more and more, the more competitive an organization is, the more there's a need to have better and better workflows. Certainly a lot of time and money can be saved, and that's just about that. If you're a nonprofit, you want to deliver better services more economically to your members or your clients or whoever you service. So it's not always about profit making. Better profit, be more competitive. It's also about, if you're a nonprofit, we deal with a lot of nonprofits, to our government, delivering better services to your members or clients or citizens or whatever. So, it has that aspect to it too. Map out the processes and consider ROI before implementing. It's always good to design before you build. Measure twice, cut once, as they say in the carpentry world. If you map it out and you vet it, maybe do some mock-ups, some wireframes, some whiteboarding, whatever, then people are going to bang on it a little and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And then you get a more complete SOW, statement of work, or design before you go actually implement it. It saves time, developer time. There are various tools in SharePoint and Office 365. Went through a few of them. You guys might have ideas of your own using other tools, but basically I think Visual Studio or SharePoint Designer or the platforms like Nintex, K2, and others are possible. And then Crow Canyon takes this slightly different approach where we provide this Nitro layer, our unique set of capabilities, and which include a workflow manager. So if you're from more of the application perspective, you want experienced vendor, established vendor who's done help desk, asset management, customer support, security access, on and on, onboarding in SharePoint and Office 365, and then be able to tweak it and customize it within the application itself. That's an approach we take, and we'd be glad to talk to you more and more about that. We provide a full set of functionality while including workflow capabilities, customization options within them. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope you found this useful. There's another session coming up November 3rd on reporting and analytics. That should be quite interesting also. What tools can you use for reporting and doing analytics inside of SharePoint? What do we have in the Nitro platform for that? There's also the session 1 recording on UI UX available on our video library as well as YouTube. So meanwhile, stay in touch with us. We have the Twitter handle there, LinkedIn, blog. You can also follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn. The blog, we're always posting new and interesting articles, and sales at crowcanyon.com, interested in a demo. We're always interested in talking to our customers. And of course, we're at shows. We're going to be at Redmond, SharePoint Saturday, October 29th, Redmond, Washington. We'll be in Sacramento, November 5th. We'll be at the SP TechCon in San Francisco in early December, as well as the SP Fest in Chicago, which is also early December. You check our website or contact us for any information. Come talk to us in person. Love to meet our customers, love to meet people, talk about SharePoint. It's what we do. We live and breathe it, SharePoint and Office 365. And also we have the phone number, of course, too. We'd love to hear back from you, love to hear any comments, but also I hope this webinar has been of some interest and value to you to spend 40 minutes of your time with me doing this, and appreciate your attendance. So thank you very much.